Capital One Duo is quickly rising in popularity and threatening favorites like the Chase Trifecta. Whether you're looking for value or more advanced maximizing your rewards, both these setups will do. But with the simpler 2-card setup from Capital One and an ecosystem that's fast improving, can it really dethrone Chase? Well, I have cards from both Capital One and Chase receiving thousands in value from each card. So in this video, we'll go over my take on these cards and their ecosystems, how they compare, and how they fit in your credit card strategy. Now to start off, we have Capital One and the first of the 2 cards, the Capital One SavorOne, which even if you're not talking about systems or comparisons, is an amazing card in and of itself, as it gives some solid returns on some common categories, like eating out at restaurants, going to concerts, or shopping for groceries to cook at home. Well, the card has you covered, giving you 3% back across dining, entertainment, popular streaming services, and grocery stores, with a baseline of 1% back on all other spend. On top of that, you'll be getting 10% back on Uber and Uber Eats, as well as the Uber One membership, all the way through November 2024. 5% back on hotels and car rentals through their portal, and 8% back on Capital One Entertainment. That was a mouthful. Given this card has no annual fee, it's a solid pickup for anyone's wallet, with dining and groceries being 2 of the most spent on categories. And I'm no exception. Just looking at Chase in 2022, which is where most of my spend was, over 60% of the year's spend was on dining and groceries. Yikes. On the bright side though, no matter how much you spend in those categories, you'll always get the full 3% cash back, given there's no limit or cap on how much you can earn from these categories. Nor are there any foreign transaction fees when you're spending abroad, something that both the Chase Freedom cards will still charge you for. You'll also get a $200 welcome bonus after $1,000 of spend in the first 3 months, which is a nice touch, but is double the spending requirement compared to the Freedom cards. And at least personally, I haven't seen this offer elevated much, if at all. Now, the SavorOne is already such a strong card on its own, but when paired with the Capital One Venture X, that's when things really shine. Because although the 3% categories on our SavorOne are quite broad, you're bound to have spend that does not fall into one of those categories. And that's where the Venture X comes in, giving you 2 times miles on all spend with no limits and no categories, on top of some great returns like 10 times miles on hotels and rental cars, and 5 times on flights, both when booked through the portal. The one difference here is you'll be earning venture miles, which do have a floor value of just 0.5 cents per point when redeemed for cashback, but you should be using these points at minimum to apply towards any travel purchases on your card, giving you a 1 cent per point value, meaning the 2 times miles would then be worth a 2% back in value. There are plenty of other ways to redeem Capital One miles for decent value, but the only other one that's worth mentioning is transferring points to travel partners and booking that way, usually targeting upwards of 2 cents per point in value or more, doubling the return on all of those multipliers. That's perfect because the way this duo works is that the cash back you earn on your SavorOne can be converted into venture miles at 1% to 1 cent. So instead of getting 3% back, you'll get 3 times miles, but you can get even more value depending on your redemption method, but more on that later. Now, a big reason why this card has been so popular is that although it is a higher tier card, it comes with a much lower annual fee compared to the likes of the Amex Platinum or the Chase Sapphire Reserve, as well as having a couple simple credits to offset that cost. So if you take the annual fee of $395 minus the $300 travel credit you get every year towards the Capital One travel portal, minus the 10,000 miles you get every anniversary year, which is at minimum worth $100 towards travel, and then you get paying you $5 per year to keep the card open. But does this card cut corners to achieve this price? And is there still enough on the card to give you that more elevated travel experience? In my opinion, no, it does not cut corners, and yes, it will give you those amazing experiences. First, you get lounge access through their own line of lounges, as well as Plaza Premium and Priority Pass, with the latter one giving you unlimited guests instead of just 2. You'll also get free authorized users who themselves will also get this level of lounge access for their own guests as well. In my personal experience, I'd say most of these lounges here in the US will range in value between $10 to $20, which if you travel a lot can add up. And if you rent cars a lot, you'll get a ton of value from this card too, because it'll offer you Hertz President Circle, which you can then match over to other elite statuses to get perks like choosing whichever car you want in the lot, as well as faster free days. And of course, with any premium card, you'll get a bunch of travel and purchase protections too, and by now you can probably tell I really like this card, which is why I have a video going through my full experience up in the corner. All of these perks, in my opinion, are already worth much more than the $395 in annual fees. But we can't forget about the welcome bonus too, which is a 75,000 point welcome bonus after 4,000 to spend in the first 3 months, which at 1 cent per point is worth a minimum of $750, or if you're going for that 2 cents target, could be worth more than $1,500. Now, although the SavorOne and the Venture X are the most popular 2 cards in the setup, there's something to be said about alternatives. First, you can swap the SavorOne card for the straight up Savor card. Essentially, it's a very similar card with a few differences. It has a higher $95 annual fee, a slightly higher $300 bonus, but for a higher spend in the first 3 months. And the main one getting 4% cashback on dining, entertainment, and popular streaming instead of 3%. Basically, to boil it all down, the Savor card will be more worth it if you spend more than $9,500 in those elevated categories of dining, entertainment, and select streaming services, which is where the break-even point is. Although this amount might be lower depending on how much you value these venture miles. Say if it's 2 cents per point, then to break even, you'd only need $47.50. Then there's the Venture card, which has a much lower $95 annual fee. However, lacks all of the amazing credits which make the Venture X pay you every year, as well as the amazing lounge access, elite status, and a few other things. So I could see swapping out the SavorOne for the basic Savor depending on how much you spend there, but I would still recommend going for the Venture X if you can, given if you travel even just a little bit, that card will put you way ahead. Then of course we have the Chase Trifecta, which has been recommended over and over again for beginners and experts alike, and honestly for good reason. Because what kicks off the setup is 2 beginner-friendly cards that have no annual fees, but a very strong points earning potential. With the Chase Freedom Unlimited, you get a card that has no annual fees, a pretty decent $200 or 20,000 point welcome bonus, as well as the 1.5 times multiplier for points on all spend with no limits. A nice little catch. And that's on top of their 5 times on travel through their portal and 3 times on dining, takeout, and drugstores. And with the Freedom Flex having the same great welcome bonus, but instead of 1.5 times on all of your spend, you'll get an elevated 5 times points on rotating categories up to $1,500 per quarter, with some of my favorites this year being grocery stores and Amazon. Both cards will also offer you perks across companies like DoorDash, Lyft, Instacart, and more compared to the Uber benefit you get on the SavorOne. Combine both the Freedom cards and you have a solid set of categories to earn you some major points, and be able to redeem those points at a baseline value of 1 cent per point for cashback, unlike Venture Miles. But that's not all. Unlike Capital One, Chase gives you much more flexibility on how you could redeem your points. We already mentioned getting 1 cent per point as a floor value towards cashback, but when you combine your points and redeem it through the third card, the Chase Sapphire Preferred, you can get an elevated value of 1.25 cents per point when redeeming for travel through their portal, which we'll actually go through in just a little bit. That means if this is your primary way of redeeming points, this multiplier applies to basically all the different rates across all of your cards, turning your 5 times points to 6.25% in value and 3 times points to 3.75% in value. And then of course, you'll still maintain the ability to transfer these points to travel partners, targeting that 2 cents per point average. But the Sapphire Preferred isn't in the setup just to enable that ability. It holds its own too with its $95 in annual fee, giving you a $50 statement credit for hotel stays through the portal, to 2 times on general travel, 3 times on online groceries, and 3 times on select streaming services. There's also a major welcome bonus of 60,000 points, which has gone up to 80 or 100,000 quite often. You'll also get even more partner benefits across similar companies, with DoorDash and DashPass being my favorite, given I've ordered through them way too often. Now, you might say that, hey, this isn't a fair comparison because the Venture X is a premium tier card, but the Sapphire Preferred is not. And you would be right. Technically, the Sapphire Preferred is the more common variant of the Trifecta and the one I would recommend, but you could replace it with the Chase Sapphire Reserve, which is the more premium card. With a higher $550 in annual fee, you will get a really easy to use $300 travel credit to apply towards travel purchases on the card, which sort of makes it an easy, effective $250 for the card every year. And for that amount, you'll get a higher 10 times multiplier on hotels and car rentals through their portal, like the Venture X, and 10 times on Chase Dining, no groceries here. You'll also get access to Chase's own lounges, as well as Priority Pass. Although you will only be limited to 2 guests, you will get non-lounge benefits here, including those like restaurants, as well as even more elevated travel and purchase protection and partner benefits. But most importantly, you'll get an even higher bonus on your points when redeeming for travel through their portal, at 50% bonus instead of 25%. But if you're like me and primarily use your points through travel partners, then this doesn't really apply. Again, full video breaking it all down above. Alright, so both Chase and Capital One offer a nice set of cards that cover what most people would need. And both ecosystems have their own respective travel portals that offer even more value, like credit from the Capital One side, or elevated value for your points on the Chase side. But how do these two travel portals compare? Let's take a look at 2 real examples, one domestic and one international. For domestic, let's do something cross-country like flying SFO to New York City sometime in October. If we search on both portals, we'll see that the cheapest flights are flying on JetBlue, not bad, and for amounts in the mid 200s. With the Capital One portal coming just a little bit under Chase's by like $6. Personally, I would call this a tie here, but you can be the judge. Just for comparison, if we look over at Google Flights, it's showing the lower rate of $248 on their search. And now what if we look at another popular destination, flying from SFO to Tokyo? And we'll limit it to just non-stop flights, just to be more specific. Here we see that Capital One is showing us a lowest fare price of $1241 on United or $1251 on ANA, which in my opinion is a much better value and experience. Then swapping over the Chase, we see $1190 for United and $1252 on ANA, so slightly beating out Capital One by about $50 on the United fare. And then for comparison, Google is showing just $1120 for the United flight, undercutting both portals and showing the Zip Air budget airline of $894, which was not shown on either of the other platforms. So what did we learn here? The prices are not too far off, especially for domestic flights, which is what most people would be flying. Maybe it depends on the dates or when you check, but personally having cards from both programs is nice because that allows me to search both portals to see which one gives me the best prices. From personal experience, I found that Capital One has given me at least the Google price, if not better, for all of the flights that I've booked. And because it allows me to use that $300 travel credit and give me elevated points for those bookings, it's why that's been the primary card I've been using for most of my cash flights. But what's more is that the Capital One travel portal gives you some nice to have perks as well, like telling you when it's a good time to book, the ability to freeze prices, as well as price drop protection and price match, which makes the Capital One portal, in my opinion, a better experience. Now that's just the travel portals. What about wanting to get the most value out of your points by transferring to travel partners? Well, let's take a look at these 2 lists. At first glance, Capital One might seem like a clear winner here given it has more more partners, but they're actually more even than you think, and in some cases, Chase wins out. Both programs have Air Canada Aeroplan, which is an amazing and flexible program giving you great value from Star Alliance airlines like EVA, ANA, or Asiana. For example, you can redeem for a business class flight from the West Coast to Asia for 75,000 or even just 55,000 points, more than what you'd have in welcome bonus for either of these setups. And then some other standout programs here include British Airways, Emirates, Singapore KrisFlyer, and Virgin. I won't go into all the details breaking all these down because it'll take too long, but let me know down below if you think that would be useful. Now, we've just gone over airlines so far, but if we take a closer look, there are hotels as well. But the only one worth mentioning here is probably Hyatt and their partnership with Chase. As probably one of the most popular redemption methods through Chase, Hyatt is a pretty easy way to get at least the minimum of 2 cents per point in value, given their relatively simple and straightforward tiering system for their hotels. For example, looking at some hotels in New York, you could get 2 to 3 cents per point in value with some decent availability just a couple months out. And the same goes for a popular destination like Tokyo on some amazing hotels, or going to Hawaii as well. So when it comes to travel partners, honestly, I'd say it's pretty even, but Hyatt being on Chase just barely tips it over in that direction. With that said, is there really a better setup here? Well, not really, but that says a lot. With Capital One just recently coming on the scene and already competing head-to-head with some of the best like Chase says a lot about their direction. In my opinion, I think both setups can exist together, but it's important to know which order you get these cards. Personally, I would recommend first starting with the 2 Freedom cards and then get the Sapphire Preferred. And that's because you want to start the clock on some of these welcome bonuses, which has a 24-month gap on the Freedom cards or 48-month gap on the Sapphire cards, as well as Chase's 524 rule saying you won't get approved for new Chase cards if you've had more than 5 new cards of any issuer in the last 24 months. Given Chase cards are so valuable, you probably want to consider those first. Then after you're done with those, I would consider going for the Capital One cards here, with the SavorOne beefing up your regular spending, and the Venture X giving you those premium travel experiences and sweet spot redemptions. Though in my opinion, once you have the Venture X, the Chase Freedom Unlimited becomes kind of redundant in a way because the Venture X will act as your catch-all card, which would then turn your Chase setup into a duo or Bifecta. Also, it's worth noting that Capital One cards are sometimes more difficult to be approved for, with people having great credit scores being denied, or people who have way too many credit cards or credit lines open. And so do be careful and consider front-loading some of these cards. But once you have these cards from both issuers, you can really spread out your spend depending on which cards will give you the best return on those categories, as well as decide where you want to transfer your points from depending on any elevated bonuses for transfers on either platform. Having so many overlapping partners is amazing because when you're redeeming points, you can pull in from 2 different programs, which is exactly what I did on my 2 major business class redemptions for 3 to 4 people, totaling over $26,000 in value. So go on and check out these videos for a step-by-step walkthrough on maximizing your points, and I'll see you over there.